na le batho ba fetang 15 million ba dulang mona Afrika Borwa. Kaofela ha rona re hloka tjhelete hore re tsebe ho iphedisa le ho tswellisa maphelo a rona pele. Re sebeletsa tjhelete ka thata, ka mora moo re isebedisetsa ho reka dintho tseo re di hlokang ho bebofatsa maphelo a rona. Le ha ho le jwalo, dintho ha di ka moo re nahanang ka teng. Bongata ba batho ba qetella ba lahlehelwa ke tjhelete e ngata ba sa ikemisetsa ka baka la ho se tsebe ditokelo tsa bona. E ka ba ditokelo tsa hao tsa mosebetsing, ditokelo tsa hao jwale ka moreki, kapa tsona ditokelo tsa hao tsa molao. Ho bohlokwa ho lemoha ha o qhekanyetswa. Ma-Afrika Borwa, e ka ba le tseba ditokelo tsa lona? Ha o utlweng ka taba ena lenanehong la kajeno la Rands with Sense. Bitso laka ke Mmarona Kgwele. Mme kajeno lena re tlo shebana le ditokelo tsa rona jwalo ka ma-Afrika Borwa. Re tlo tobana le hore molaotheo wa naha ya rona o tshireletsa ditokelo tsa rona jwang. Ho tloha ho ditokelo tsa rona jwalo ka bareki, ho fihla ho manyalo, tlhalo le tsa mosebetsi. Jwale he, ha re kene tabeng, hore re tsebe ho etsa tjhelete, re hloka ho sebetsa ka thata. Ha re bone hore Employment Equity Act e tshireletsa ditokelo tsa rona jwang jwalo ka basebetsi.
The Employment Equity Act is essentially for those from previously disadvantaged groups. So we call them designated groups. And the Act sort of would apply to them. Those would be women, black people, colored people, disabled people, anybody that wasn't white in the pre-94 era. So it protects them in a way that they can't be unfairly discriminated against. If they apply for jobs, they can't be unfairly discriminated against on any grounds. If they apply for promotion or if they apply for anything within an organization. The Basic Conditions of Employment Act is an act that was established for those persons, those employees rather, that earn below the provided threshold in the act, which is about 183,000 per annum, just about. It increases every year, but that's the current amount for 2015. And any employees earning below that amount, they have a special act that applies to them. So that is the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, which regulates, for example, overtime, leave pay, lunch hours, anything that sort of needs to be discussed with your employer within your employment agreement. But these are aspects that are statutory and that can't be contracted out of. There's a minimum, for example. So after 5 hours of work, for example, you need to have a break of at least half an hour. So those are the kinds of things that are regulated in the Act and they can't be contracted out of.
Ka bomadimabe, tlolo ya melao ya ditokelo tsena e etsahala re sa lemohe le ho lemoha. Setsebi sa rona se ile sa fana ka tlhahisoleseding ka taba ena.
Sometimes, unfortunately, there are circumstances where employers do know the rights that they need to comply with, but unfortunately they take advantage of employees in these situations. Often employees don't know what to do when violations have occurred, and that is why it is important that employers educate their employees, and if they do not know the employment laws, they need to seek out employment attorneys or employment consultants who can educate the employers so the employers can in turn educate the employees, and therefore the employees would then know when a violation has occurred. To avoid violations of employment rights, employees should request from their human resource department of the organization which they work for that the HR department either educate them with workshops, or as required by law, there should actually be posters up within the environment stating what the basic conditions of employment are and what the employment equity laws state for this country. In my experience, the rights that employees most frequently are not aware about are rights pertaining to their leave, rights pertaining to overtime pay, rights pertaining to breaks or lunch hours, and rights pertaining to minimum wage within their respective sectors of work. The majority of employees in South Africa aren't aware of the minimum wage requirements that their employers need to comply with within their sectors of work. For example, often domestic workers and farm workers are not aware that there is an actual scale of minimum wage that they are entitled to. So it is important that everybody find out, and you can find out at the Department of Labour, or you can find out on the internet just what the minimum wage is for your sector.
The Basic Guide to Unfair Discrimination ka hara ha Employment Equity Act e tshireletsa basebetsi le batho ba batlang mesebetsi mabapi le kgethollo. Na o tseba ditokelo tsena? Ha re ke re di bone ka botlalo.
Ngokwe-Basic Guide to Unfair Discrimination ngaphansi kwe-Employment Equity, akunasisebenzi okufanele sibandlululwe ngezizathu ezilandelayo: ubuzwe, ubulili, ukukhulelwa, isimo somshado, ukumela umndeni, ubuzwe nobuhlanga, umbala, iminyaka, ukukhubeka, inkolo, isandulela ngculaza, ukukholwa, ezepolitiki, amasiko, ulwimi nokulwaza. Noma kunjalo, akusikubi ukubandlulula ukwenza i-affirmative action, ukukhipha noma ukukhetha abantu ngoba bengafinyeleli izidingo ezifunekalayo kulowo msebenzi. Umzekelo, umuntu oyimpumputhe angeke anikezwe umsebenzi wokushayela ibhasi. Lokho angeke kubonakale njengobandlululo olungalungile. Uma uzwa sengathi ubandlululiwe, kufanele ubhalele ku-Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration kungakapheli izinyanga eziyisithupha. Ukwazi kabanzi ngamalungelo wakho eNingizimu Afrika, vakashela urandswithsense.co.za, ubheke nekhasi lethu la ku-Facebook.
Selebale ditokelo tsena tsa mosebetsi. Jwalo ka mehla, ho na le mahlakore a mabedi ho ntho tsohle. Ha re utlwe hore na bahiri bona ba tshireleditswe ke molaotheo wa rona jwang.
Examples of rights that apply to employers would include all rights that are in the contract which the employer has entered into with the employee. For example, employers are entitled to request that an employee who is absent on a Monday, a Friday, a day after a public holiday, or more than 2 days in a row, the employer is entitled to request that that employee provide the employer with a medical certificate. Employers also have the right to control what their employees do or do not do during working hours. For example, if employees are found to have been participating in activities that are not work-related during work hours, they may be subjected to disciplinary action. And a hearing would take place, and the employee may either be sanctioned with a first warning, or if the employee has been found to repeatedly have violated the employer's rights, this may lead to dismissal. One of the great things about employment law and labor law in this country is that the laws are constantly being amended to ensure that employees and employers' rights are both protected.
Kaofela ha rona re na le ditokelo, empa ho bohlokwa ho hopola ho hlompha ditokelo tsa batho ba bang, hobane di bohlokwa jwalo ka tsa rona. Ka mora papatso, re shebana le ditokelo tsa bareki, mme re bona hore re tlameha ho ela dintho dife hloko. Re le amohela, le shebeletse Rands with Sense, lenaneo le buang ka bolokolohi ka maemo a rona a tjhelete. Kajeno re shebana le hore ditokelo tseo re nang le tsona mona Afrika Borwa di tshireletsa rona le maemo a tjhelete ya rona jwang. Pele re ya papatsong, re ile ra shebana le ditokelo tsa basebetsi, hobane kaofela ha rona re hloka ho sebetsa hore re tsebe ho etsa tjhelete. Re sebedisa tjhelete eno ho reka dintho tseo re di hlokang ho phela le malapa a rona. Ha re sebedisa tjhelete ya rona, ho bohlokwa hore re tsebe ditokelo tsa rona jwalo ka bareki. Ekaba wena wa di tseba na?
Me, as a consumer, I don't know. I don't know my rights. I don't know what am I supposed to know, which is, I think it's a very bad thing on my side.
I think as a customer, when you feel like your rights are being violated, you must go to your manager, your supervisor of the shop so that they can help you or assist you with that thing that you are not happy with it.
Honestly, when it comes to consumer rights, I'm not that educated. I mean, I sometimes say that as Africans, we maybe don't complain enough when we get bad service. I mean, bad service for me is a big headache. And what I'm entitled to, I don't know. So.
The consumer rights in South Africa, I think a lot of people aren't aware of what their rights are. I just know that personally, if I buy something that doesn't work, I go back to the shop where I bought it and able to get a refund or a replacement.
Haeba o batla bonnete ba hore o sebedisa tjhelete ya hao hantle, ho bohlokwa hore o tsebe ditokelo tsa hao jwalo ka moreki.
The Consumer Protection Act is basically there to govern commercial transactions and to protect the consumer from service providers or producers that may take advantage of them. There are a couple of things that are covered in the Consumer Protection Act. Things like a cool-off period, so if somebody has marketed something to you through direct marketing, so they've contacted you via SMS, or they've phoned you, they've contacted you via email, basically anything where you haven't initiated an inquiry for the sale, and you agreed to the purchase, and then a couple of days later you change your mind, you've actually got 5 days that you can go back to that seller and to say, thank you very much, but I've changed my mind and I actually don't want to proceed with the sale. And you have the full right to get a refund if you've paid any money or to cancel any contracts that have already been signed. So that's the one thing that the Consumer Protection Act does to protect us. One of the other things is that it makes sure that there is the correct disclosure and information given to us. So all facts need to be disclosed on products, on labeling, all terms and conditions need to be included in contracts. Further to this, the information that is used to describe these facts or to describe the conditions and the terms of the sale need to be in very, very plain and understandable English so that it's accessible to everybody, to your average Joe. So one of the other things that the Consumer Protection does is that it prevents contracts from being automatically renewed. It's one of those sneaky clauses that is always worked into the contract somewhere. So it doesn't mean that consumers can't renew contracts, but what they have to do is they have to notify you in writing before they initiate that automatic renewal. Some of the most common rights that consumers have that are frequently violated are the right to fair and responsible marketing. So service providers or credit providers sometimes make claims that are not true. With the Consumer Protection Act, consumers have recourse. So for instance, if you buy a cell phone that claims to be waterproof to 50 meters and you drop it in a glass of water, you drop it in your toilet, you drop it in your swimming pool, and your cell phone breaks as a result of being submerged in water, you can take it back to the manufacturer and you could say, your claim is not holding up, you need to replace the product, it's been faulty. If they refuse to replace the product, you can actually take it to a regulatory authority who will then settle the dispute for you.
Re etsang haeba re na le tletlebo e itseng jwalo ka bareki? Ekaba ke dife ditletlebo tse tlwaelehileng tsa bareki mona Afrika Borwa?
Ziningi indlela zokuthi abantu bafake izikhalazo zabo. Bayakwazi ukuthi basifonele, sine toll-free number, bayakwazi ukuthi basi-emailele, sinayo i-email, bayakwazi ukuthi basifaxele, sinayo i-fax, bayakwazi ukuthi basipostele, sinayo i-post box, and bayakwazi ukuthi basivisithele e-ofisini zethu. I-success rate yethu kuma-complaints esiwatholayo inkulu kakhulu, iyafika nje 75%, and then kulikota nje phelayo siseva ama-consumers more than 1.2 million rands. Imali ebuyela kuma-pocket abathengi. Ama-complaints amaningi esijayele ukuthi sidilishe nawo ngayimoto ezindala. Umuntu uyasuka hamba ethenga imoto bese abhadale 50,000, ubabhadale 100,000. iviki ingakapheli imoto ayisahambi, then abantu bayaza bazokhalaza ukuthi or ezinye sijayele ukuthi sihlangane nazo futhi i-complaints ngezama-electrical goods, ama-cellphone, ama-TV, ama-fridge, even nezokulungiswa kwemoto kumbe nezokwakha izindlu. Ufumaniseke ukuthi umuntu wakhe indlu kayakhanga ngokusemthethweni, indlu yanethela, uma kunganetha amanzi angena endlini. Abathengi ngezinye izikhathi or ngezinye insuku abakwazi beze kithi bezolodge i-complaint uma ukuthi yiwo abangasebenzisanga izinto abazithengile ngokusemthethweni ngokwendlela okufanele bazisebenzise ngazo. Because zonke into esizithengayo zibuya ngesingisi bathi i-manual. So kubalulekile ukuthi njengabathengi ukuthi umuntu angathenga into aqala afunde i-manual, azi ukuthi into isebenza kanjani.
Ho tseba ditokelo tsa hao jwalo ka moreki ho bohlokwa haebe o batla ho boloka tjhelete ya hao. Haebe o iphumana o tetebetse ka hara dikoloto, hopola hore ho na le ditsela tse ngata tsa ho tswa maemong a o leng ho ona. Ke tsena dikeletso tse bohlokwa tseo ma-Afrika Borwa a leng dikolotong a tshwanelang ho di tseba.
Fa o amogela lekwalo leo le batlang karabo ka potlako, bua le morekisi wa gago o leke go tlhalosa seemo sa gago. Se ka ipolela gore kgang e tla fela, ga ena go fela fa o sa arabe. Fa morekisi wa gago a sa batle go go thusa, kopa thuso go counselora ya dikoloto e kwadisitsweng. Motho o tla go thusa go baakanya le go berekana le sekoloto sa gago. Se ka tlodisa dituelo tsa gago. Le fa o ntse o tsamaya counseling ya dikoloto, fa o ka tlogela go duela, o ka latlhegelwa ke ntlo kgotsa le sejanaga sa gago. Gopola gore sekoloto sa ntlo ya gago se botlhokwa go feta dikoloto tse tsotlhe. Se ka tlodisa tuelo ya ntlo ya gago. Leka ka bojotlhe go duela madi a lekaneng. Simolola go boloka gompieno. Nako e dula e le teng go simolola go boloka. Fa o boloka, o ithuta go dirisa madi a gago ka tsela e molemo. Gape, o tla lemoga dilo tseo di leng botlhokwa mo botshelong jwa gago. La bofelo, dula o le sedi ka dinako tsotlhe. Itse ditshwanelo tsa gago mme o di dirise. Fa e ka re ditshwanelo tsa gago di a gatelelwa, batla thuso. Fa o batla dintlha tsa gore o ka thusega jang mabapi le sekoloto, e ya go randswithsense.co.za kgotsa o re shebe mo Facebook.
Batho ba bangata ba kgetha ho reka dintho ka sekoloto. National Credit Act e re tshireletsa ka hohle hohle mabapi le tlolo ya molao ya ditokelo tsa rona jwalo ka bareki. Ha re ke re utlwe ka tokelo tsena.
The National Credit Act is designed to protect consumers in the credit industry. And basically, it's a set of rules that governs all the major stakeholders that are involved in the granting of credit. So it looks at credit providers, it regulates things such as the affordability assessments that they need to do. It regulates the fees that they can charge around administration fees, interest, and the likes. It also governs credit bureaus, so it gives them instruction on what type of information they can hold on a consumer, like your payment history, like your defaults and your judgments, how long they can hold that information and how regularly it needs to be updated. The National Credit Act also gives debt counsellors a framework in which to work. So it gives us a very specific guideline on what processes we need to follow, on the timelines that we need to stick to, and very importantly, the fees that we need to charge, or the maximum fees that we can charge for the services that we offer. Some of these rights are violated by credit providers. This could happen when an affordability assessment isn't done properly, so it's a very superficial assessment with no proof to back it up, or the affordability assessment has been done and it's shown that the consumer cannot actually afford to take out more credit, but the credit is granted regardless. If a credit agreement is found to be reckless, there are various things that can be done to rectify it. Sometimes the credit provider will write off past payments or future payments. They might pay some of the money back to the consumer, they might reduce interest rates, they might extend terms. Everything that is done, though, is always in the consumer's benefit. One of the great things with the introduction of the National Credit Act in 2007 is that it's opened up access to credit for absolutely everybody. So everybody has the right to apply for credit. Nobody can be discriminated against. And if your credit is declined, you have the full right to know the reasons that it has been declined. But it really, at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to make sure that you can afford these payments because it's your signature that goes onto that contract.
Hasemohe, keletso tse bohlokwa e le ka nnete. E ka ba ho etsahala eng ha dikoloto tsa rona di bangata ho feta tekano? Ebe ditokelo tsa rona ha ho le jwalo ke dife? Re tla utlwa ka sena ka botlalo ha re kgutla papatsong. O shebeletse Rands with Sense. Lenaneo le shebanang le tsela tseo ma-Afrika Borwa a laolang tjhelete ka tsona. Kajeno re ithuta ka ditokelo tsa rona. Mme re bona hore di tshireletsa tjhelete ya rona le bokamoso ba rona jwang. Ha re kgutlele tabeng ya National Credit Act, bongata ba ma-Afrika Borwa ba kopana le mathata ha ba tlameha ho patala koloto tsa bona. Ekaba National Credit Act e re tshireletsa jwang ka tlasa maemo ana?
When it comes to defaulting and debt enforcement, South Africans have the right to apply for assistance. They've got 10 days from the first notification to make an application either with the debt counsellor or with the credit tribunal or go to an ombudsman to seek some form of assistance with their debt repayments.
Batho ba bangata ba hloleha ho patala koloto tsa bona, mme ba qetella ba se ba hloka thuso ya di-debt counsellor. Re ile ra kopa debt counsellor hore e re hlalosetse ka sena le hore ditokelo tsa rona ke dife mabapi le debt counselling.
Debt counselling is a solution that was introduced in 2007 with the National Credit Act after seeing that so many consumers were over-indebted and needed some form of assistance for getting out of debt. Debt counselling doesn't pay off your debt for you. It doesn't eradicate your debt, but it helps to create a structured and affordable method for you to pay off your debt. The first step in debt counselling is to go through a full assessment. The debt counsellor will look at all of your income, they'll look at all of your expenses, they'll do a full analysis of all of the debt that you have, and they'll understand what exactly you can afford to pay back. The next step is for it to go into credit negotiations, and this is where the debt counsellor then liaises with your credit providers to make sure that your repayments fit within the affordability amount that was determined through your assessment. Once this has been agreed with all of your credit providers, the interest has been reduced, the fees have been stripped out, and the terms have been extended, it then goes for legal application where it either will go to the National Consumer Tribunal or it'll go to a court to get a rubber stamp from the magistrate or from the National Consumer Tribunal to say that this is the agreement that needs to be paid. The main advantages of going under debt counselling is that you've got peace of mind, not only because you have one payment to pay every month that you can actually afford to pay back, but you also get legal protection, which means that credit providers can't knock on your door and repossess your assets like your home or your car. This is provided you're making a full payment every month according to your repayment plan. The end goal of debt counselling is to get you a clearance certificate, which means that you've paid off all of your debt. Another benefit of this is that your credit score continually improves as you make payments through debt counselling every month. And by the time you exit debt counselling, you've got an excellent credit rating.
Ntho enngwe eo bareki ba tlamehang ho ela hloko ke ditokelo tsa bona mabapi le insurance. Ho ba le insurance ya nakwana le insurance ya nako e telele e ka ba morero o motle. Empa o hloka ho etsa bonnete ba hore ha o patale tjhelete e ngata ho feta tekano. Ha o utlwe hore ditsebi di reng ka taba ena.
When it comes to insurance, there's two types of insurance. There's short-term insurance and there's long-term insurance. The main differences between short and long-term insurance is that short-term insurance is immediate and your payment is made immediately when there's a claim, as opposed to long-term insurance, it's a long-term investment. It's something that's going to happen in the future. An example of short-term insurance would be building and motor car insurance, and an example of long-term insurance would be a life policy or an investment. Any consumer that is unhappy with the outcome of a complaint or a claim has the right to refer through to the Financial Services Board, and he also has the right to go to the internal or the external insurance ombudsman. He's an impartial party that will support and assist the client in solving the complaint. An example of that would be where the client's claim has been declined and he doesn't understand the reason for it not being paid or declined. Quite often the consumer doesn't understand the jargon and the terminology that's being used, and that is when the ombudsman will assist. The biggest problem when people are buying insurance is that they're focused on price. The insurers can sometimes put restrictions in your policy in order to reduce your premium. And that is what the consumer needs to be aware of. So when you're comparing your policy from one insurer to another, you need to ensure that you're not just focused on price, you understand the cover in terms of your policy. Example of that would be under your motor car. So if you get a quote from one insurer and he's quoted you R1,000 and you've got no excess applicable when you have a claim, and an excess would be the first amount you would need to pay when there's a claim, and you go and get a quote from another insurer that's quoting you R500, he may, or that insurer may have quoted you with a big excess that you're not aware of. And if you don't ask the question, you're not going to know that until there's a claim. When you take out an insurance policy, you should get a policy schedule and a policy wording or policy document. And if you don't get that, it's important for you to ask for it, because that will stipulate the cover and the terms and conditions of your policy. If you're unsure, rather ask questions. If the person cannot answer your questions or you're unhappy with the answers that you're giving, then escalate it within the company until you understand the contract. You're paying valuable premium every month, so it's important that you know what you're getting for your premium.
Keletso e bohlokwa ka nnete ha o batla ho reka insurance. Batho ba bangata ba na le funeral insurance ho netefatsa hore maloko a bona a kgona ho ba boloka ka hlompho ha se ba hlokahetse. Ke tsena dintho tse o tlamehang ho di ela hloko ha o batla insurance ya lepato.
Musi ni tshi renga policy ya mbulungo kana ya zwiṅwevho, dzhielani nzhele uri muthu ane khamphani ine na khou renga khayo ina ḽiṅwalo ḽa vhuṋe ḽi no bva kha Financial Services Board ḽa u rengisa. Arali ni si na vhuṱanzi, ni na pfanelo ya u humbela u sumbedzwa ḽaisentsi yavho. Dovhani ni ḓivhe uri muvhulungi ndi nnyi. Phoḽisi dza mbulungo dzi anzela u rengiswa nga dzi third parties. Ḓivhani uri hu ḓo badela nnyi hone ho saina nnyi kha musi wa tshiwo. Ḓadzani fomo ya khumbelo nga inwi muṋe tshifhinga tshoṱhe. Ni vhale zwoṱhe na oṱhe maḽeḓere maṱuku. Arali ni sa pfesesi uri zwiṅwe zwi amba mini, vhudzisani ni vhone uri ni khou pfesesa zwoṱhe. Arali hu na mbudziso maelana na mutakalo wanu kana u ḓigana, ivhani khagala kha u amba mafhungo oṱhe. Musi ni tshi claima, muvhulungi a wana uri a no ngo amba zwoṱhe zwe a pfi ni ḓadze kha fomo, phoḽisi yanu i nga imiswa kana na sibadelo. Musi khumbelo yanu yo ṱanganedzwa, ni tea u rumelwa phoḽisi kana zwidodombedzwa. Kombetshedzani kha u vhona ḽiṅwalo. Vhalani ni pfesese. Zwi songo ralo, founani ni vhudzise uri zwi amba mini. Ni ḓo vha na maḓuvha a 30 a uri musi no ṱanganedza ḽiṅwalo ḽa zwidodombedzwa, ni imise arali ni sa fushei. Vhonani uri ni badelwa lweṱoloṱo lwa tshifhinga ṅwedzi muṅwe na muṅwe, nahone ni vhee tsumbo ya mbadelo. Arali lweṱolweṱo lu sa badelwa, pholisi i nga imiswa kana ya hanula u ni badela. Musi muṅwaliswa o lovha, muṋe wa pholisi u tea u rumelwa claim nga u ṱavhanya. Pholisi i ḓo ni vhudza uri ni na tshifhinga tshingafhani tsha u claima nga murahu ha lufu. Arali claim yo lenga, i nga hana u badela. Humbulani zwauri arali vha hana u ni badela nga thikhedzo yo imaho ngauri, mulanguli kana muvhulungi u fanela u nifha tshiitisi tsha u hana nga luṅwalo. U wana vhuṱanzi vhunzhi, sedzani website yashu kha randswithsense.co.za. ni dovhe ni wane nyeletshedzo kha siaṱari ḽashu ḽa Facebook.
Ena ke Rands with Sense. Lenaneho le re tlisetsang ditharollo mabapi le mathata a rona a tjhelete. Ka jeno re bua ka hore ditokelo tsa rona jwalo ka ma-Afrika Borwa di re tshireletsa jwang maphelong a rona, malapeng le tjhelete tsa rona. Jwale ha re fetele ditokelong tsa banyalani. Ho na le mefuta e fapaneng ya manyalo mona naheng ya rona. Re ile ra kopa setsebi sa rona hore se re hlalosetse phapang ya manyalo ana le ditokelo tsa ona.
Partye wat trou besluit hoe hulle wil trou. Wil hulle huwelik hê binne gemeenskap van goedere of wil hulle huwelik hê buite gemeenskap van goedere? Nou om die binne gemeenskap van goedere huwelik te beskryf, beteken dat wanneer jy trou met 'n persoon binne gemeenskap van goedere, dan word jy outomaties die helfte eienaar van die netto waarde van die boedel. Met ander woorde, wanneer daar 'n egskeiding byvoorbeeld sou wees, word die bates en die laste van mekaar afgetrek en die netto boedel word dan verdeel tussen die twee partye. Die probleme is met 'n huwelik binne gemeenskap van goedere is omdat daar een boedel is die risiko soveel groter van skuldeisers se kant, want wanneer die een party skuld maak, dan kan 'n krediteur of 'n skuldeiser kom en basies beslag kom lê op die gesamentlike boedel van die partye omdat dit een boedel is. So vir iemand wat in besigheid is dit nie 'n goeie idee om binne gemeenskap van goed te trou nie, want die risiko is te groot. En vir iemand wat niks geld het nie, is dit natuurlik nou weer lonend om met iemand binne gemeenskap van goed te trou wat baie geld het byvoorbeeld, want by egskeiding gaan hulle geregtig wees op die helfte daarvan. Die volgende manier hoe 'n mens trou is by wyse van 'n huweliksvoorwaarde kontrak of 'n HVK soos dit algemeen bekend staan. Nou wanneer jy 'n huweliksvoorwaarde kontrak aangaan, dan sluit jy die gemeenskap van die boedel uit byvoorbeeld. Met ander woorde, by 'n egskeiding byvoorbeeld, kan jy net uitstap uit die huwelik uit met dit wat jy ingebring het in die huwelik. So dis ook nie 'n goeie manier om te trou nie, want die partye bou nooit 'n gesamentlike boedel saam met mekaar op nie. En albei, soos ek gesê het, loop dan op die einde van die dag in 'n egskeiding net met dit wat hy ingebring het in die huwelik. Dan is die ander in ons reg en die tendens in Suid-Afrika sien ons meer en meer dat mense trou buite gemeenskap van goedere met die aanwasbedeling. Dit beteken dat hulle gesamentlik bates opbou gedurende die bestaan van die huwelik en dan deel in daai bates by egskeiding. Byvoorbeeld, waar mense trou met die aanwasbedeling en by 'n egskeiding, argumentsonthaalwe, sê maar die vrou se boedel het met 0 begin toe hulle getroud is, en by egskeiding is die vrou se boedel argumentsonthaalwe nou R100,000 werd. Die man se boedel sê nou maar het gegroei van 0 toe hulle getroud is tot R300,000. Dan gaan kyk 'n mens na wat is die verskil in die twee se aanwas. Nou die vrou se was 100,000 en die man se 300,000. En as jy die twee van mekaar aftrek, dan is die aanwas R200,000. En die vrou of die persoon met die laagste aanwas het dan 'n eis vir die helfte van die verskil van die aanwas So die ander party gaan R100,000 kan kry. Nou wanneer jy buitegemeenskap van goedere trou met die aanwas, dan kan jy ook sekere bates uitsluit in die huweliksvoorwaarde kontrak. So jy kan byvoorbeeld pensioenfonds uitsluit. Jy kan 'n effekte trust uitsluit. Jy kan 'n eiendom, jy kan enige bates kan jy basies gaan uitsluit uit die aanwas uit. En dan word daai bates nie in ag geneem eendag wanneer jy sou skei byvoorbeeld nie.
Ka bomadimabe, batho ba bangata ba qetella ba hlalana. Mme sena ha se ame maikutlo a motho fela, empa se ama le tjhelete ho feta ntho tsohle. E ka ba ho etsahala eng ha batho ba hlalana? Ebe ditokelo tsa rona ke dife ho ya ka molao?
Wanneer mense skei, het hulle verskeie regte om kompensasie te eis in 'n egskeiding. En daar's sekere faktore wat die hof in aanmerking neem om te bepaal of jy wel kan onderhoud eis. En van daai faktore is byvoorbeeld die standaard waarop jy geleef het op daai stadium, hoe lank die mense, die party met mekaar getroud was, die kapasiteit van die man byvoorbeeld om onderhoud te kan betaal ensovoorts. En dit word als in aanmerking geneem om te bepaal of daar inderdaad 'n onderhoudseis is al dan nie. Egskeidings kan 2 forme aanneem, eintlik baie meer forme aanneem. Een van die forme kan ons weer gaan klassifiseer in subkategorieë, maar dis gewoonlik bestrede en onbestrede. 'n Onbestrede egskeiding beteken dat die 2 gades kan ooreenkom op 'n verdeling van die boedel, op onderhoud en indien daar kinders betrokke is, oor wie kry die beheer en toesig van die kinders. Dis die goedkoopste manier om te skei en myn insiens ook die beste manier om te skei. Want dit beteken dat dit die minste konflik het vir die pare. Dit is die vinnigste en die mees koste-effektiefste wyse om te skei. Bestrede egskeidings. Die rede hoekom dit so duur is, en dit kan letterlik R100,000 beloop eventueel, is omdat waar mense nie kan ooreenkom oor onderhoud byvoorbeeld nie, of oor die finansies nie, dan word forensiese auditeurs ingebring, in die geval waar die mense beklei oor die kinders, dan word daar sielkundiges of maatskaplike werkers ingebring om te bepaal watter ouer is nou die beste ouer om na die kinders te kyk. So, dit is nie net 'n prokureur of 'n advokaat wat werk in 'n onbestrede egskeiding nie, maar 'n totale span van mense wat allerlei experts insluit. En ons sien ook dat die meeste egskeidings wat bestrede is, word in elk geval geskik eventueel. Maar die tragiese is dat wanneer die egskeiding geskik word, is die mense baie keer slegter af as wat hulle sou wees as hulle die egskeiding geskik het. En ons sê dit is altyd beter om miskien dalk die geld liewer uit te gee op die kinders as wat jy dit gee vir die experts en die prokureurs en die advokate op die einde van die dag.
Haeba o batla ho hlala molekane wa hao, mme ha ona tjhelete ya ho patala boramolao, o ka mo hlala o sa ba sebedise. Re tswela pele ka taba ena ka mora papatso. Re le amohela hape. Ena ke Rands with sense. Ka jeno re bua ka maemo a rona a tjhelete, mme re bona hore re ka ingatafatsa jwang hore e re tswele molemo. Ka jeno re ithuta ka ditokelo tsa rona jwalo ka ma-Afrika Borwa, le hore ditokelo tsena di re tshireletsa le ho tshireletsa tjhelete tsa rona jwang. Re ile ra shebana le ditokelo tsa rona jwalo ka basebetsi, ra shebana le ditokelo tsa rona jwalo ka bareki, ha mmoho le ditokelo tsa rona mabapi le manyalo le tlhalano. Setsebi sa rona se re file dikeletso tse itseng ka taba ena.
Baie keer gebeur dit dat mense nie 'n prokureur kan bekostig nie. En dan moet 'n mens kyk na ander opsies. Nou ons streekshowe wat egskeidings hanteer, het 'n diens waar mense self hof toe kan gaan, vorms invul, dagvaarding uitreik en met behulp van die hof eintlik verniet skei. wat jy ook deesdae baie sien, is dat mense maak gebruik van aanlyn egskeidingsdienste op die internet, waar jy vraelyste kan invul en die stelsel of die maatskappy stel dan dokumente op wat dan gebruik word deur die partye om hof toe te gaan en dan te skei. En dan betaal die mense 'n sekere bedrag vir daardie vorms. Nou, wanneer jy gebruik maak van 'n aanlyn egskeidings besigheid, moet jy net seker maak dat die dokumente reg opgestel word deur die maatskappy of die diens. Want die probleem is, en ons het al agtergekom in die praktyk byvoorbeeld waar daar pensioenfondse betrokke is, moet die beskrywings van uitbetaling van gedeeltes van die pensioen so omskryf word in die skikkingsooreenkoms op 'n spesifieke manier wat aanvaarbaar is vir die fonds, vir die pensioenfonds. En as dit nie is nie, dan weier die pensioenfonds uitbetaling van pensioengelde. So, die punt wat ek wil maak is dat wanneer 'n aanlyn egskeidingsdiens gebruik word, maak seker dat dit kredietwaardig is en dat daar een of ander vorm van kontrole is deur mense wat weet wat hulle doen.
Haeba o batla ho hlala molekane wa hao, mme ha ona tjhelete ya ho patala boramolao, o ka mo hlala o sa ba sebedisa. Ho na le ntho e bitswang DIY divorce, mme e tlwaelehile haholo, empa e sebetsa fela ha o na le tshepo ya hore o ka kgona ho ikemela o le mong. Ke ana maele ka sena.
Ge o nagana go dira tlhalo ntle le moemedi, dikgetho tša gago šidi. Tlhalo ya gago ga ena phigišano, molekani wa gago o a idumela. Tlhalo ga e be bothata ge e ba ga gona bana ba ba tsenago. O nyetše nakwana e nnyane, ga lena dithoto tše le ka di abanago. O ikemišitše go dira ditaolo ka moka. Ge eba o ikemišeditše go dira ka bowena, dikgetho šidi. Magistrata a ka go fa difomoro tše di hlokegago le dikeletšo tša gore o dira bjang ntle le moemedi. Ge o sa nyake go etela kgorong ya tsheko, o ka šomiša online advice bjalo ka idivorce.co.za go kopanya dipampiri tša tlhalo. O ilo go lefela le go tlatša dipotšišo le go patela ditshenyagalelo ka moka. Gopola, ge bana ba le gona le ge go na le dithoto, retirement goba provident fund, go kaone o hwetše moemedi wa semolao go feleletša tlhalo. Go nyaka tsebo, lebelela Rands with Sense goba o re etele go letlakala la rena la Facebook.
Keletso e bohlokwa ruri, haholo bathong ba shebaneng le sena hona jwale. Re ile ra botsa setsebi sa rona ka ditokelo tsa rona mabapi le motswadi ya loketseng ho nka bana ka mora tlhalano, le hore bana bao ba patallwa ditlhoko tsa bona jwang.
Wat die kinders betref, het die kinders altyd 'n onderhoudseis teen hulle ouers tot die dag dat hulle self onderhoudend is. Maak nie saak of hulle 18 is of 24 is nie. Dit hang af of die kinders op daai stadium in 'n staat is om na hulle self finansiëel te kan omsien. Waar 'n kind sy ouers nie vir hom kan onderhoud betaal nie, het daai kind 'n eis teen die oupas en die oumas vir onderhoud ook. En wanneer hulle nie kan betaal nie, kan selfs 'n onderhoudseis ingestel word teen die ooms en die tannies. Wanneer ouers nie kan ooreenkom oor die beheer en toesig van die kinders nie, oor byvoorbeeld wat 'n ouer die primêre sorg van die kinders moet hê, moet daar 'n sielkundige of 'n maatskaplike werkster ingebring word om voorstelle te maak oor wat in die beste belang van die kinders gaan wees En dan daai voorstelle word gewoonlik vervat in die ouerskapsplan. Want elke geval is anderste en dit hang af gewoonlik maar van iemand wat 'n deskundige is om te sê wat in die beste belang van die kinders gaan wees as die ouers nie daaroor kan ooreenkom nie. Nou as baie keer het mense nie die fondse om 'n kliniese sielkundige of maatskaplike werkster in te bring nie. En dan word daai dispute gewoonlik verwys na die familieadvokaatskantoor wat dan kosteloos namens die partye 'n maatskaplike werkster aanstel en 'n ondersoek doen om te kyk na wat is in die beste belang van die kinders.
Ekaba ditokelo tsa hao tsa mosebetsing, ditokelo tsa hao jwale ka moreki, kapa tsona ditokelo tsa hao tsa molao. Ho bohlokwa ho lemoha ha o qhekanyetswa.
Well, when it comes to rights and what we don't know, I don't think it's really advertised as much. I mean, if I read in newspapers and magazines, it's not something that I actually read about. It doesn't really spark much of an interest either, but to be honest, if I have to read about it. So I suppose it's maybe a little bit, we are uneducated, and I suppose we also maybe accept some things that we shouldn't.
Ja, ek dink daar is sekere regte wat stilgehou word, en dan hoop hulle maar die verbruiker vind nie uit nie. Maar op die ou einde, as jy iets gaan koop, moet jy weet wat aangaan. Jy kan nie net iets koop en onkunde eis op die einde van die sê dat jy regtig nie geweet. Ek voel as 'n verbruiker moet jy ook ingelig wees, dis jy wat die geld spandeer.
I feel like it's everyone's responsibility to go out there and look and try to find as much information as they can about their rights. But I also feel like they need to have some places or programs or institutions where they can actually broadcast and it can be on everyone's level. Then even if maybe you're walking into a shop, maybe there's a small something out there, then you can just know your rights and all those things.
Selebaleng dintlha tsa rona tse tharo tsa bohlokwa tsa ka mehla mona ho Rands with Sense. Ya pele, sebedisa tjhelete e nyane ho feta eo o e kgolang. Ya bobedi, le ka tsela tse ding tsa ho eketsa mokgolo wa hao. Ya boraro, etsa dintho tsena ka bobedi ba tsona. Ke nna Mmarona Kgwele, ya le hopotsang hore le dule le etsa Rands with Sense ka mehla ma Afrika Borwa. Salang.